What's in the Box episodes of horror with Donna and Eric. I'm Donna,
And I'm Eric.
and today we have author David Viergutz with us, another author that will be at Texas AuthorCon next month. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Donna. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great getting you on here.
yeah. And there I see a kitty tail. What's the kitty's name?
That's Silas. His
Silas.
original name was Bones, but he's a rescue cat from the streets, the hard streets of Burnet, Texas, where I'm from. And if he interferes with our interview, I apologize ahead of time.
Oh
Oh,
no,
no.
it's quite fine. It's quite fine. We always have pet guests on, so it's not a big deal. So we're just going to start off with some fun icebreaker questions. So, Jason, Michael, or Freddie? Who's your favorite?
Freddie, absolutely.
Oh, you didn't even have
Yeah.
to think about that.
No, Jason and Michael are absolutely boring. At least Freddie's got an interesting backstory and a reason to want to kill everybody. On top of that, I mean, the guy lives in your dreams. I mean, what? How can you combat that?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I mean, obviously the answer is Jason, but we'll accept Freddie. But yeah, no, I'm totally with you. And I get it too. The first Nightmare and the third Nightmare, they're such great movies. And he's such a good character. And the fact that he talks adds so much more to it because you can kind of connect with his sarcasm and all that stuff. I always lean Friday because I like the whole arc, all the movies. And there's a lot of Nightmare movies that I could do without. But Freddy, when he's done right, yeah, it's hard to beat. That first movie is just tremendous. In fact, that's one of my first horror movies ever seeing. So it's kind of the thing that put the imprint on me. So I won't argue with
Yeah.
it. What's funny is when we first started this, it was only Michael or Jason as our opening, because those are the two that seem to be knocked around the most, in those verses kind of thing. And everybody, like the first three people said Freddie. If they could have Freddie as a choice, they would take Freddie. So he's very popular on that.
Yeah. All right. Now, what about Team Vampire or Team Werewolf?
Is it wrong to say I'm disillusioned with both of them? I
Not
mean,
at all.
I am just absolutely exhausted with vampires and with werewolves. I'm still looking for someone who could redo it. I think I was talking with Jay Bauer, a good friend of mine. He's going to be at the con as well. And we went to Jonathan Mayberry's talk at 20 Books to 50K. And he talked about a vampire, which I believe it's in the Philippines, is not what we imagine as a vampire, blood sucking, that sort of thing. But it is essentially somebody's corpse. Their spine and head detaches from the corpse and floats around the room. That to me, I was like,
Oh,
I want to meet that vampire,
yeah.
Yeah.
done differently. So I'm waiting for somebody to give me a floating head werewolf or something else like that, where it's equally as interesting and new. So I am neither until somebody can come up with something different.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think the traditional vampire is boring, and we don't need the
Yeah.
pretty vampire. The one that gets the most love is more like what is it, 30 Days of Night, the more, maybe the Blade 2 vampire. That's an interesting vampire people
Yeah.
have discussed. I kind of like that when they're a little more, I don't know, bestial and they go after things. But yeah, we usually lean more towards werewolf, but you're right. It's a lot of the same stuff. And so it really is how good is the transformation and how fun is the kills with the werewolf movies.
Yeah.
So
And the mythology behind it, because depending on the book you read, and we've experienced this, Eric, when we're reading the werewolf books or our
mhm.
werewolf series, some have different mythos on how somebody becomes a werewolf. It's not just a bite, or it's not just they're born that way. It's depending on the book you read. So I think they kind of had to come up with that to make it a little bit different. Because David, you're right. It's I love werewolves. I'm team werewolf all day long, but there's only so many ways you can write the werewolf story.
I was
Mhm.
quite nervous there for a second. I thought you were going to ask me Team Edward or what's the other one for the vampire and the
Oh
from
God, I
Jacob.
can't.
It's
Twilight.
Jacob.
Yeah,
Jacob. Don't
I
Yeah.
thought
act
you were
like
going
you
to
don't know.
ask
Donna's
No.
acting like she doesn't know. Yes, of course, it's Team Jacob. So that is also the correct answer if we're going to jump into that. My wife's big
No,
into Twilight, so I've seen them all. I know the
I have
backstory.
not. I have not.
Uh,
I am not.
well, then now we have something new for what's in the box. When we get back to books and movies, we can get into that. So
Twilight? No, you'll be
yeah.
on your own there.
Yeah. So okay, well, what was your favorite scary movie as a kid then?
Man, it's an old movie, but I don't think, I don't know how hardly anybody that's uh, uh, heard of it. It was actually a movie called Wendigo, um, and it's I believe it's early 1980s.
Mhm.
But it was the true mythos behind the Wendigo. And I remember a particular scene of it. I still can't find the movie itself. But I don't know if it's kind of like Rose Red. You can't find Stephen King's Rose Red anymore,
Hmm.
the video version, because it was a series of TV minis. This version of Wendigo was the same way, and I just remember this guy, this girl having a dream, and when the closet opened up, and there was a guy running through the closet towards her with his hand out with a gun, and he's pointing and clicking and clicking. His eyes are all wide. And it was part of the fear and the introduction of the Wendigo and the what it does to its prey prior to, as it marks its prey. It kind of drives them insane and feeds off the fear. So that was my first true, I would say, horror movie. I got introduced very early to the Alien movies. My mom is a very big 80s buff, so John Bon Jovi and Sigourney Weaver. That's where I fell in love with the 80s. Was through the Alien movies. So, and then of course Predator. So I guess that kind of
Mm.
somewhat counts as horror. I would kind of probably put it more sci-fi action, but
Yeah,
definitely the original Alien movie.
I'm always surprised now when I'm looking around and people are like, "Oh, I love these horror movies," and they'll throw in Silence of the Lambs, Aliens, Predator, and I always thought, well, Silence of the Lambs is a serial killer movie, and those other two are sci-fi movies. But yeah, totally with you. I think they do fall into it. I mean, it just depends on how broad you want to go with the definition of horror. And those are two of the best I think that the '80s gave us:
Oh
Aliens
yeah,
and
for
Predator.
sure.
Yep.
So
I loved Alien versus Predator, man.
I
You
did
got
too. I'm a big
both.
fan of the first one.
Yeah, I'll eat them all up, even though there some people find them redundant because it's nothing new.
Mhm.
But I'm like, as a fan of the franchise, um, I'll just like Star Wars. A lot of people bash on prequels and stuff like that, but I'll sit there and watch anything Star Wars. Excuse me for a second. This cat is a terrorist. Um,
They all are.
um, but I'll watch anything simply for the love of the series. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be necessarily very good because after I don't know, there was one Predator movie that I was like, I think it was the most recent one where it had a bunch of veterans and stuff, but I was like, that wasn't very good
Yeah, the one
comparatively.
with Shane
But
Black, the one that Shane Black directed, the one Predators, Olivia Munn's in it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I think that's because they let too many, cooks in the kitchen, and so
yeah,
you end up with this weirdly edited, put together movie trying to hit some marks it didn't need to. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I'm totally with you. I'll give any of those a shot. You want to put it on film, I'll be there, And if it is terrible, well, maybe it's terrible, but at least it's another little bit of something that I love to watch. So I'll get
Yeah.
that's kind of how we were with the werewolf movies. That's at least how I am with it. So
Yeah.
Especially when they bring the lore into it. I like the
yeah.
lore. Tell me the backstory. Tell me the big world that I'm missing.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
especially when they wove it with the aliens, I was like, man, they did it well. That they did very, very well.
yeah.
Hmm.
I was excited when Disney bought Fox, because I was like, they're going to start pumping out stuff like they do with everything and give us some more, hopefully give us a lot more Predator aliens, mix ups and stuff. So
It's a winning franchise.
yeah,
I
for
don't know
sure.
one that hasn't done very well. Its fan base is very rabid.
Hmm. So as an adult, what's your go-to horror movie? What do you like to watch?
Event Horizon. I mean, that's the epitome for horror right there.
Yeah.
It it kind of flew under the rug for a lot of folks. A lot of folks are coming to it late to the game. I try to introduce them as much as possible because that is by far the most terrifying movie I've ever seen. And I try to. A lot of people have actually watched Sphere. They like Michael Crichton's Sphere, and they're like, and then I'll make them watch Event Horizon. They're like, oh my god, this is like the same thing, just one's in space and one's horror, the other one's science fiction and a little creepy. And
Hmm.
I'm like, but I remember watching Event Horizon as a kid, and that was one of those ones. Or as actually, no, I probably watched it not as a kid, probably about in my 20s. I watched it for the first time. I kind of just stumbled upon it. I was like, what is this? And I watched that one through my fingers for sure. Like that was
Yeah.
just absolute favorite.
Yeah,
A
I
lot of
saw it.
people have said that during
Yeah,
these
it's an
interviews.
amazing movie. It's one. Yeah, I remember seeing it opening night, and it was during a time when some theaters didn't have the super surround sound, but the one we went to a specific one, drove like 20 minutes, 30 minutes away to get to a theater that just put in the big surround sound, big screen. And it's one of the best movies if you've got all the stuff going on, because they really take advantage of the sound, and then everything else really throws you off. So I've been a huge fan since day one with that one. I'm a big fan of the director, even though I know a lot of people think he's kind of campy and stuff. So, but yeah, he really hit it out of the park with that one.
Yeah, and I can see the poster behind your desk there, and just I love seeing just, you know, it's you see a lot of sci-fi covers nowadays. They got the big ship, but you see those words Event Horizon, it just changes the ball. You know, it just changes the game completely of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
I loved Event Horizon so much that I wrote a screenplay called Astrophobia, which is a throwback to Event Horizon, because I just noticed there was so much missing in today's horror for space horror. There's a couple of good ones out there, and a couple that feel like you would expect space horror to feel, and just nothing that's really, you know, directly on the nose. This is space horror, or if there is, it's a very small market. In fact, I guess this is probably a good point to reveal it. I'm pretty sure a lot of folks have heard of Boris Basic. He's a good friend of mine. Him and I are co-writing a story called the same name, Astrophobia. So we'll be releasing that this year, which is a call to Event Horizon.
Very cool. Yeah, the only person I can think of when I think space horror usually is Mike Duke.
Yeah,
Amalgam.
Yeah.
Yeah, there definitely is it. I think a lot of the problem with space horror is it gets shoved under the sci-fi. You know, like the only other thing that I can think of off the top of my head besides Amalgam is Death Troopers. It's a Star Wars novel, and that's the only other thing I can think of as far as books go for space horror. I'm sure
there's the Luminous Dead, and that's kind of, I think that one's I think that's a trad book, but that's cave diving. It's very similar scenario wise. But then there is also Dead Silence. That one is a ship, explicitly space horror, a ship on space. But the horror it's kind of along more in the veins of Ghost Ship. I don't know if you remember that movie. It's very much on, and it's kind of I will say I'm a little critical of the book, because I think they do the first thing that most horror authors do, and that's they say, "Oh, look, the scary thing," and they try to make the scary thing jump out of the page and make it say, like, "Here's the horror." Like, they do that at the very beginning of the story, and it just lacks from that point on, because the horror is there. There's no build up to it. And so I think that I know I struggled with that when I first started writing horror. It was like, the spooky thing is there, and now what do I do? Because I've already revealed it. And you can't do jump scares in horror, in horror fiction. So I think that's what most people revert to, and most people think of when they think of horror. They think of the scary thing jumping out at them, and I guess they are terrified of that happening from a page. And I'm like, sentence format, the scary is not gonna.
It doesn't translate. Yeah, it doesn't translate at all. So
yeah, but that's another one. It's still a good book. It's not written in a perspective that I particularly enjoy. I think it's first person. I can't remember the specific of it, but it's first person in that weird first person present tense, basically. I do this, I do that, and I instead of I did this, it's I do this, and that's just really weird to me.
Yeah, that's a tough one to get through.
Yeah. Now, if somebody were to come to you and say, "Hey, I'm new to reading horror," what would you recommend they start reading?
Of my own or somebody else?
Either.
Like a go-to, like, hey, I've never touched horror at all. What's something that you enjoy that you might say this is somewhere you can start?
I mean, The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I think that was probably the best. Number one, it's a novella, which it's not as challenging to a reader to overcome, and it's more akin to slow burn horror, where the scary thing is. Takes forever to get there. Without spoiling the book, I would tell, like, it's one of Stephen King's earlier works, and it's really well done in characterization. It's a girl in the woods with nothing but her radio. He's very active in discussing his faith, or discussing the faith of the character in that, so people can relate to that as well. And besides that is just kind of a plight of this girl to survive the woods, the North Woods, when she gets lost from her family. And then they have the supernatural element at the very end, which is just incredibly well done. But I would say that's a great place to start. Everyone talks about Salem's Lot too, because everybody can talk about everybody likes vampires or werewolves, but
Right.
vampires and werewolves, kind of the mythos behind them, they can kind of translate one and one for as far as the role they play in a story. So Salem's Lot's another easy read, I would say. And as a fanboy of King, I mean, I think that's a great place to start. I recently read Nick Cutter's The Troop, and that's a different kind of horror, and I really love that. So I would direct folks there too. It's a little bit different. It's kind of like body horror, and it takes place on an island with a bunch of kids. So I don't know if people can't deal with that, but I mean, that would be another one.
Nice.
What
Now,
about you guys?
Oh, when we did this episode, I think I picked The Ruins by Scott Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just it's a longer book, but it's one of those ones where you get lost in it and you don't even feel like you're reading it. And the tension and the horror build up in that one as you watch what happens to those people in the jungle. It really can get you. It gets you, on different levels, it just depends on where you are. And do you remember what you said, Donna?
I don't remember what I said. It was probably Moondance by S.P. Somtow. It's a werewolf book. It's a historical piece, takes place in the 1800s America. And it's really interesting, but I do have to out myself because this was pointed out to me. I know I've said that I would not ever
got a message about this.
I would not recommend a new reader to horror to like Daniel Volpe or Aaron Beauregard, but my best friend called me out on my BS and said that's exactly who you recommended to me when I first started reading horror. And I was like, you know what? You're right.
She gave her friend Talia for her introduction to horror. So, and then she's and Kim was totally correct, and because you did say that the first couple times, because we've had a couple people do that, like, oh, I'd give them like Layman or Ketchum or even Lee, like that's the first. Somebody I think said Header, right? That was the book that they wanted to introduce people to horror with.
It was Wrath James White.
Roland
Percy said Wrath
right.
James White.
Yeah,
and I was like,
that's a bit extreme, but
yeah.
But well written. So I mean, that's really what we're looking at here. You just jump in there, get in the deep end. Come on, dive in there.
Yeah, but see, she's my best friend, so I knew she could handle it. So it was like I had no problems recommending it to her, but I just wanted to out myself so everybody knows I'm a hypocrite.
That's all right. Special case. That's usually the answer we get is, well, it depends on what the person wants, might be into, their level of whatever, how much how well you know them. And then everybody usually gives us a King novel or something in that vein, which is, I mean, that's what everybody, I think almost everybody in this group, everybody at the tables at the event are going to be able to point to the King novel that introduced them into this genre that we all love. So,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look what happened to the market. I mean, that was the King model and the King method. As something I've kind of coined. I don't know if it was coined itself. I Googled it and it doesn't exist, so I'm coining it. But basically the idea that you take a bunch of strangers, put them into a room together, and then find a scary thing that's terrible and make them deal with it. That is the King method of writing his stories. And it became formulaic in the 80s and 90s. And so, publishers saw the cash cow and started mass producing novels like that. And so you can find a lot of old King that reads like a lot of that same old 80s, 90s horror. And so, I mean, I think it's pretty fair that somebody at some point would probably get introduced to a King novel and be like, okay, this is how I got started. It was just the ones that were there, This is the horror. This is horror section. It says King on it. So,
I mean, that's really it. If you go to Half Price Books, what is it? It's Keen, it's Kuntz, it's Rice. And if you're lucky, lucky, well, even then, that's a lucky thing if you find them there. But Half Price Books in Texas, it's always going to be 7,000 books of King, Kuntz, Rice, and then a little bit here and then you might find some splatterpunk and some stuff, which you can pull out there and discover some new things. But there's a reason they're popular, right? They hit the formula, they know what they're doing.
Call me cynical, but I think it's just quite amazing that horror writing talent is just passed on through the sperm cells. And it just happened to fall on Stephen King's son, whereas he's getting to an age where he doesn't want to write anymore and he's fixing to retire. So I think
Yeah.
that's quite fun.
Yeah.
But
I'm
also a bit
convinced that
cynical.
Joe Hill is his clone actually and not his son because they look like identical.
Yeah, yeah.
So do
He's
you
actually-
have like a favorite? Well, what is your favorite horror novel? Did y'all hear
Of all
that?
time.
I heard something, but I couldn't tell
Okay,
what it
good.
was.
Yeah, my kid's losing his mind. He's playing video games in the other room.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine's over there fighting sleep with her mama and does not want to go down. My favorite horror novel, I mean, I've already mentioned it, but I mean, just The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. I mean,
Okay.
No, is it? Okay.
I-
So that's cool.
yeah.
A lot of times it's not the same, you know. So
yeah, and I've read a lot. I've been pretty diverse with it. I think a close second is actually a recent book, which again by Nick Cutter, The Deep. Because I love deep sea horror. I like the bit of insanity that's there, a little bit of the supernatural mysticism about the weird hole in the wall. I mean, it just kind of went off the rails, and I like when an author can do that, where I'm well vested enough in the story where I'll just believe whatever he puts on the page. You know, I believe that there was a mysterious hole in the wall, and I believe that there was a bunch of bees that made this crazy nest and were taken over. I mean, in the the very bottom of the ocean, I believe it. I believe that the tubes were shrinking on this guy as he's crawling through it. So I mean, not to reveal too much of the story, but I mean that's Nick Cutter did that successfully. I mean, besides throwing thesaurus at the book, he did a good job. I mean, I really enjoyed it. That's a more recent book.
Mhm.
Close second, very sure.
Mm. Nice. Now, for those that don't know your works, because I've read St. Andrew's Cracked Altar. Is it Cracked Altar, St. Andrew's, or St. Andrew's Cracked Altar?
Cracked Altar, St. Andrews. Yeah. You got it.
Okay, I couldn't remember. It's been a while since I had read it. So for those that don't know, your books, tell us what genres or genres that you write in, because I looked at your website briefly and it looks like you have a couple different genres.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I started off in dark fantasy, thinking I was a dark fantasy author. I thought I was gonna write fantasy, epic fantasy, because I grew up reading mostly epic fantasy, like most kids. I mean, I was getting handed the thickest books I could find is what I wanted to read, especially. And so I wrote a fantasy series that I really should have been labeled as grimdark or dark fantasy. And that's a really tough market to hit. And so I wrote that series and realized I didn't really like it. And I was encouraged by my friend Jay Bauer. He said, "Hey man, write a horror short story." And so I did, and he read it and he said, "You're a horror author. Stop writing fantasy." And I was like, "Okay." And so I started writing horror. I've got thrillers, of course, but my thrillers are I hit the market really well with those. They're my cash cow. I enjoy writing because they're about cops, and I'm a cop, so I mean that's fun. But it's not really something that I'm like. I still am trying desperately to make horror work for a lot of folks, not just myself, but to figure out the market and understand how to make the sales work for us. But my horror is my go-to. That is my love. That is where my passion lies. So most recently, I kind of tested the theory of said, man, can I create something terrifying that is more akin to real life as opposed to the supernatural? Because the supernatural, I've got supernatural stories. Cracked Altar is a supernatural story. Wendigo is, of course, supernatural. It's very true to the lore. I've got The Haunting of Belford Manor. It's a haunted house story. I mean, every horror author's got to write a haunted house story, right?
Yep.
And then Old Scratch is about cultists, which always fascinated me. And I love the new Waco series that came out. So I really, really wanted to write about cultists, and at the end, of course, you had to have something crazy that they were trying to summon. So, I like horror. I want to stay with horror. And my thesis is actually on horror, so on horror writing. So my Christian university is handling that very, very well. It's totally sarcastic. They gave me a lot of guidelines of which to stick with, because their idea of what horror is very much what a lot of folks are. They said, well, you can't have blood and guts and terrible things, like, and I'm like, no, I mean, like, I've got a Christian twist on my horror novel. And they said, what? And I said, trust me. And they said, okay. And so that's yeah, I've got a zombie series. I think every horror author has to write some zombies at some point. My zombies are scary. They aren't fun. I think there's something difference between fun zombies and scary zombies. So my zombies are scary. The people that are involved in the stories are dealing with it instead of surviving and making castles out in the middle West Texas. So they but yeah, that's I wrote a book called Not Okay, which was completely about nothing supernatural at all, as I mentioned earlier. It was all about character's mindset. He was schizophrenic. Not to big reveal, but I mean it's very clear early on. I deal with a lot of mental health patients in my job, and so I can see the terrible things that happen with them. And I said, man, I need to do homage to them. You know, to I don't know, pay it forward, but it's more like this is what it's really like for them. And
Right,
my
draw
wife,
some
she was
attention to it.
yeah, and so my wife, she's a counselor, a certified counselor, and so she helped me make sure that the symptoms and stuff were not just my impression of them, but
Yeah.
true to the DSM. And so she helped me kind of with that. And then at the end, I put resources for people who are experiencing suicidal ideations and stuff. So it was kind of a different, interesting take on it. It's less than traditional, that's for sure.
And those can be more effective. Stories like that can be more effective because that is someone's true life. You know, that is your neighbor is going through that right now.
Yep.
You know.
Yep. And that's kind of what I saw too. Was I said, man, I can, like, people. There are going to be so many folks relating to this, and that was a lot of the reader response was like, this is so true to me. Like because it wasn't just schizophrenia. There's a bit of anxiety in there as well. There's a little bit of agoraphobia. You know, just normal things that people were experiencing, but explained in a way that they're like, man, this is what I'm really afraid of. Like, I don't want to have to deal with this. Like, I even put one of my fears in there was that at one point he imagines that somebody's burning a manuscript that he only has a paper copy of. I mean, and that terrifies me. I've got backups upon backups. So, I mean, it's the idea of losing that, you know, that's real fear to me. So, so yeah, I think that's a pretty good intro to my horror.
Yeah.
I try to stick to the supernatural. Definitely. I really enjoy it. It's really, really tough to make it interesting and new, but I try to do something different with Cracked Altar. I try to do something with each of my books. So Wendigo was kind of the same way. It's written differently. And that series has kind of lived its life. I saw a lot of paperbacks still in person, but once I earned what I earned on it after the last couple of years, it just kind of fizzled out. I thought about writing a fifth book, but to be honest, it's not tight enough of a series for me to justify a fifth book. So
now that's a bummer because I really enjoyed Cracked Altar, and I've been wanting to get to the other 3 in the series, but I just read so many books and I do a lot of ARC reading that, you know, it's on my wish list. My TBR is like 5,000 books long, you know.
yeah.
So, but I will get to them, I promise.
Yeah, no.
But I think I'm going to read Not Okay first because that sounds really fascinating.
Not Okay has got one of those Sixth Sense moments in it, and over again, and everybody knows what I'm talking about. I'm like, oh, I ever see dead people, you know.
Yeah.
When you catch on to it, and when you catch on to the moment, man, it's a gut punch. It gut punched me, and I felt gross writing it. So it's a lot of fun. I think people who I at this point, I'd probably tell folks, like, if you want an introduction to what my horror is, read Not Okay, and I think you'll understand it.
Nice.
Awesome.
So when you are writing all these books, do you have music playing? And if so, what do you listen to?
Yeah, so I actually started using this app called Brain FM, which just kind of creates blue sound waves. It's just AI generated white noise. I've tried music and I get distracted in the lyrics. I start listening along and start bobbing along, and I'm like, that's not where my head needs to be when I'm writing. So I've tried background noise like movies and TV shows. I can't do that either. I'm like, I get invested in that. I either got to have complete silence, maybe some rain. You know, that's always ideal for me. I try to write whenever it's raining, pouring rain especially. I just really enjoy it. It gets really moody for me. Or just the white noise. That's where I got to be. Otherwise, I'll come out of the story, and next thing you know, I'm watching 16 episodes of The Office. I can't.
Yeah, I've never understood when somebody posts, "Oh, I'm watching this movie and writing." I've never understood how they could do that because, yeah, you're immediately pulled to the movie or the TV show.
Yeah. My cat is being a menace now. She's
There
trying
you
to take
go.
my mouse. So besides coming to Texas AuthorCon and stopping by your table, where can people find your books?
Yeah, so the easiest place to be is just davidviergutz.com. Just my first name, last name.com. I've got links to my podcast. I'm the host of the Nightmare Engine podcast. We've had authors like Duncan Ralston. I'm sorry, not Duncan. We haven't gotten Duncan. I'll pin him down and make him come on the show. We've had Tim Wagner, Ron Malfi, Boris Basic, Jay Bowers, the co-host. So that's the links to my podcast is. All the links to my paperback books are there as well. And then always on Amazon. So just davidviergutz.com is the central hub.
Okay, great. Perfect. Links below. So everybody go click and check it out. And then, swing by the table if you're going to be at the event. July 14th and 15th.
14th and 15th.
We finally got that down. We've done this enough times that we can actually just say the date. Everything else written down. For some reason, I don't have that. So
yeah, and I always
it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's a good time. I can't wait to go. You told me it was 100 degrees there today, and I was like, I can't.
Yeah, we hit 101, I think. So
it'll drive folks inside. It'll be good for them.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Yeah.
And the location is really cool, and there's access from the train and the tram and in that area, and then also directly off the highway, so it's not going to be hard to find it. So and the room layout itself is really cool, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it's even just for us to get to know each other. I mean, there's a lot more of us than we realize, and more are popping up every day. And the beauty about this is that we are not in competition with each other. We can only value from sharing our knowledge with each other because readers are not a disposable commodity. They are consumers. So if we produce, they will consume, and especially if they latch onto you, they'll say, "Oh, if you like this guy, you'll like this guy too," and they appreciate that. So, I think this is a wonderful time to be an author and to even just to come and meet together. I think that's just incredible as well. So I am looking forward to AuthorCon. I know there's been a lot of work done in the background, and I've tried to be a little more active to help, but I am swamped with I'm a ghostwriter, and I'm finishing up my thesis, so that should clear up a lot of time. But especially to write, God,
yeah,
I've been writing everybody else's books besides my own, so that's kind of frustrating.
oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
I can imagine. Yeah,
you're like, why? This could be my book.
yeah. I mean, it's really tough to watch it go. I mean, that's one of the things. And I'll say that real quick. I'm like, I'll never sign another ghostwriting contract again. The money was great, but I'll never do it again because I know somewhere out there is going to be a cover on this book and a name on this book, and it is not mine.
Yeah, I couldn't.
And I know pretty well how well my books do, and so I just know that I'm like, man, it was probably not worth the cash up front. I probably should have just published it myself, but it is what it is.
But it's an
Live and
experience.
learn.
Yeah, but it's an experience. Have it. You can have that, and you'll be able to share it with everybody else and let people know how it went for you. And so that's
know
kind of
you
a
never
cool
want to
thing.
do it again.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but I mean,
paid
that's
for
a
my whole
cool thing.
master's degree. Yeah, I paid for my whole master's degree. That was the whole
Oh,
purpose
wow.
of it. It was an easy cash influx. And I
Yeah,
said,
well, there you go.
I write about a book a month, so I'll have this done quickly. So
Wow,
Very cool.
nice.
yeah.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and we'll be seeing you in a couple weeks, about
Absolutely,
4
guys.
weeks.
How
Yeah.
crazy is that? We'll be seeing
know.
you in a couple weeks. I mean, this is just flying on us.
Yeah,
So
it sure
and
is.
it may be days. I mean, we're not sure when. Hopefully, this will be. This will definitely be posted, of course, before the event. But I don't know.
Sure.
If it'll. We'll talk about that behind the scenes. But yeah, a couple weeks though. We'll be all up there having a good time, talking, looking at books, and seeing the crowd. So
Yeah,
So
that'd be excellent.
July 14th and 15th, Richardson, Texas. You can find Texas AuthorCon on Facebook. We'll also have a link in the description to the Eventbrite. It is a free event, but if you want to be eligible for the door prizes, you do need to sign up for a ticket. So we will be seeing you guys soon. Thank you.
take it easy.
Thanks, guys.